I'm going to tell you about my project on patient innovation, a project that the team developed, which is a platform for patients of chronic diseases to share their solutions. For that, and for the process of creating that, I'd like to first tell you a little bit how we created that, how we got that. You know, if I ask you about all these products, what do they have in common? Products as different as, you know, the World Wide Web, many healthcare services, the whiteout, the Post-it, the mountain bike. I mean, do you see anything in common? Well, if you think about the sources of innovations for all these products, you will see that in the very beginning, there was a user. There was actually a need. And because of that need, a user came up with a solution. Many of these products became successful products. So that's not often the case in innovation. But we know that often users, because they are unhappy with the solutions that producers actually provide them, they innovate. You know, we all know about Mr. Ford. He was remarkable. He created Ford Motor Company, right? He was able to produce cars at a very low cost, mass-produce cars. The good news is that some users, some of the consumers that got those cars, were actually not completely happy because, for instance, they were farmers that lived in the northern part of Norway, or in this case, in fact, in the US, in Michigan. And because there was a lot of snow, they needed to do a lot of modifications to actually use the car during the winter. And by doing that, they created the first snowmobile. You know, the first truck, the first tractor were also created by farmers that were not happy with the solution by Mr. Ford. You know, Mr. Ford at the time, of course, was not doing any of this. Nobody cared about customization. He actually used to say, you know, the car can be the color my client wants as long as it is black, right? No customization at all. Of course, we saw a lot more customization by users. For instance, the first mobile chapel, which was not very successful, by the way, or even the first power plant in which the motor engine is actually a car. So, you know, all those things were modifications by users. Users have innovated a lot. Again, if we think about radical sports, if you think about these 4 kayaks over there, you would probably realize that one that was developed by an engineer that knows a lot about hydrodynamics is the one at the right. But of course, a user is not always satisfied with this initial solution. And by immediately starting to modify the initial solution, they actually created new sports. Because when we see these other solutions over here, now they are used for different uses, but they were all modifications by users. You know, you may have heard of the camelback. The camelback was no more than a solution created by a paramedic in Texas. This guy realized that when we was going out with his kids for a lot of outdoors, he was not very comfortable. He was taking a normal backpack, putting a lot of drinks in the same backpack, and this was not very comfortable. Then he realized, well, in the hospital I have those plastic bags that typically people don't use for Coke and orange juice, but for body liquids. And in fact, if I adapt some of those to the normal backpack, I can create a new product. So, you know, all these examples have nothing to do with healthcare, as you, of course, can see, right? But are just examples of the sort of research that we did and we do in terms of trying to find the sources of innovation and trying to understand what's the role of users in developing new solutions, new products, new services. Like, you know, this stroller over here, again, developed by a mother that had a baby, and because she used to jog, and now she couldn't because of the baby, she had to develop a solution for herself. You know, for a long time, we were doing research on this, trying to understand if, in fact, the need was the mother of inventions. And, you know, it makes sense to say that the need is the mother of inventions, and if that's the case, maybe we can find a lot of innovation in places of high need. So we start understanding the role of users in developing economies, in developing new solutions. And for instance, this is the case of something that we studied that was just published, the beginning of mobile banking in the Philippines. You know, the Philippines is a very big archipelago, 7,100 islands. It's a lot of islands. It's also a very poor country. People over there live on average with less than $2 per day. What's remarkable is that 80% of these people have a cell phone. Well, a similar percentage is also what they called unbanked, meaning they don't have access to a bank. Really meaning that sometimes for you to go to a bank, you actually need to take a day trip to another island to go to a bank. So it's not very comfortable. It makes a lot of sense that in a place like this, in a place of high need, a user actually developed mobile banking. That was 20 years later introduced in the US, in Canada, in many different places. So let me tell you the true story of a kid that lived with his parents in the southern part of the Philippines and then moved to Manila. He got a job in Manila, it started making money, and the poor kid wanted to send some of his money back to the parents. Well, he couldn't because the parents didn't have a bank account. So he actually had to develop a solution for these important needs. He realized that in Asia, in many places in Asia, including in the Philippines, people could actually buy airtime, as we do in Europe as well, and also sell airtime, which means you run to a kiosk and sell to the lady, well, I have 50 hours of conversation, but I need to have lunch. So would you mind removing the airtime and giving me some money? So, without knowing, he actually started developing a simple solution for people to transfer money. Because what he did was to, instead of charging his phone, he started charging the parents' phone. And the parents were in the island, in the farm, and would get a text message saying, you know what, you just got another 50 hours of phone conversation, of airtime. And if the parents wanted the money, they would run to a kiosk. But guess what? After a while, people didn't necessarily need the money. So people start, having the savings in airtime. And savings in airtime became a big deal. And at some point, airtime was the main currency of the Philippines. It was so remarkable that people were even negotiating in airtime. Maybe a cow is 50 hours of conversation and the farm is 200. I don't know. So because companies, in particular the operators, the phone operators saw that, they start developing simple solutions for people to actually transfer airtime. And what you see over there is just, my student, Paul van der Boer, wanted to buy one of these necklaces for his girlfriend, and the way we paid for this was by using the cell phone. The lady's in front of you, she gives you her cell phone, and you put the number, you put the amount that you want to transfer, and in 2 seconds this is done. Lots of payments are done like that, in a place of high need. And what's the point? The point is, yes, if the need is the mother of invention, going to places of high levels of need, it's actually good, right? It's a good place for good innovations. So, we knew a little bit about this, and we always thought that one place where users could not really do much was healthcare, because people here deal with their own health. Well, think about patients in particular. Well, can they really innovate? Well, at some point we met Mr. Taylor Goldsworthy. Mr. Taylor Goldsworthy in 1992, or actually in 2002, went to the doctor and he told him, and this is not very technical, but you could die. And in fact, what could happen here is that your aorta can explode at any moment. And this is not good news, right? You go to a doctor and the doctor tells you you may die sooner than you expect. And if the need is the mother of invention, knowing that one is going to die is probably a strong incentive to do something about it. What he did was exactly that. He went home, he took all the paperwork that he could from the doctor, and he did this in England. He started developing the valve that you see over there. It's actually not a valve, it's a support for the aorta. And making a long story short, what he did was something remarkable. He saved his own life. After producing this, he walked to his doctor's office and said, "Doctor, I need now your help for me to actually put this in, because it's, don't do this at home, obviously, complex surgery to get to the heart and put this around the aorta." Well, actually, it's fun that I just got a message from him. He's going to throw a party next weekend to celebrate 10 years of using one of these. He saved his own life. He saved the lives of many others. And we met him, and afterwards we started bumping into a lot of examples of remarkable patients, people that suffered from chronic diseases, that had innovated for themselves. if you think about autism patients, you often see them being hugged, being actually squeezed by the parents. One of the things about getting the hug is actually the comfort from the pressure. It's not so much about the love that you get in a hug like that. So this woman here, Miss Doctor, in fact, Temple Grandin, realized that she could, with this machine, control the pressure that she was getting. Because the big problem of these patients is that on one side they need to be squeezed, on the other side they actually are overly sensitive to human touch, which means too much pressure will irritate them, too little pressure won't do anything. So now with this machine, which is still very controversial, she can actually get the pressure that she wants. And the examples never stopped. Mr. Amit Goffer from Israel, after a car accident, he got paralyzed. And he was good enough to actually develop the electronic trousers. A quadriplegic was the person that developed the solution that many people now use. And after him, we met Mr. Herb Kern. Herb Kern, who's now 103 years old, discovered seasonal affective disorder, a disease that is more common in northern countries. What he realized, in fact, was that you would get depressed some days of the year. And for 15 years, he was collecting data. He was marking the calendar. Today I am depressed. And after 15 years, he started understanding that there were some patterns there. And the days in which he was depressed were those days in which there was no sunlight, no natural light. Well, with this in mind, he started experimenting with artificial light, because obviously he could not turn the sun on, but he could turn big lights in front of him.
Pedro,
yeah.
Interrupt for a second. The light in here, there's no natural light. And I think we're all feeling some seasonal affective disorder. So I propose everyone stands up, finds someone near them, and gives them a hug. That is my proposal. Please all stand up. The person you're closest to, give them a hug.
Who do I hug?
Hello. I'm offering. And give more people if you feel like it.
So I'm the only one that is not getting any egg, I understand.
Give them some hugs. Give the man some hugs. Pedro, come here. Give the man some hugs. Okay. Please, give the man some hugs.
Thank you.
She needs a hug. She needs a double hug. Okay.
Very good. I know we all feel better now. So, Mr. Herb Kern was feeling much better because of his artificial light, and he was so happy with his discovery, because he actually discovered a new disease, but also a solution for the disease, that he decided to share the news with the National Institute of Mental Health in Washington. He thought, those PhDs that are all doing research about depression will get very excited with what I found. Guess what? He sent a report with 15 years of data to the National Institute of Mental Health, and he was ignored. Nobody cared, right? Nobody was really interested because he's not a specialist. He's just a patient. What do patients know about their diseases? They don't have any degree, a PhD or MD, anything. It's very interesting because later someone finally got interested, a guy called Norm Rosenthal. He was the one that gave the name. Norm Rosenthal is a medical doctor, and he actually is very honest in his book when he says in the first chapter that the only reason, the first chapter is called My SAD Story, My Seasonal Affective Disorder Story. The only reason why I got interested in this case is because I realized that I had the same symptoms. After moving from South Africa to Minnesota, I could relate very well with this patient. The point is, often these patients face a lot of resistance. We don't care, right? We are not used to, listen to patients for solutions, listen to users in general as sources of innovations. And we were finding all these examples. This Mr. Rich Bernstein, who discovered the solution for his own type 1 diabetes. And he was so frustrated because nobody cared about his solution that at the age of 45, he decided to become a medical doctor. He entered med school to be a doctor, and actually, after that, he was able to publish a book called Dr. Bernstein Diabetes Solution. He insists on using the title, obviously. He knows that's the reason why people believe him. The stories never end. We actually collected 100 of those examples before we actually did something about it. Another example, right? another solution developed by a diabetes patient, in which she says that patients are the ones that have the knowledge in the topic of everyday use of the device. Of course, they don't have the scientific knowledge of scientists or the practice of medical doctors, but they have the knowledge of everyday using and every way dealing with a disease. And we found all these examples, and people were saying, you know, those are random industries. You are giving me examples from different diseases. You should actually look at one disease and say that this is significant. And that's when we focused on cystic fibrosis, a disease that is, you know, complex, but one of the things that we can understand, I'm an engineer, I can understand that one of the problems is that people need to take the mucus out of their lungs. Otherwise, they may get lung infections and die with this disease. So for a long time, what we were doing to these patients were, you know, chest clapping, the idea that you apply to people the so-called ketchup bottle principle. What do you do to take the ketchup out of the bottle? You clap the bottle. In this case, you do the same to the people, to the kids. And this is a nightmare. Some of these patients were having 4 hours of this per day, plus a lot of medicine, and not getting the results they expected. That's when, you know, Mr. Louis Plant, just to give you another example, came up with the frequencer. He realized in a concert that when the musicians were actually playing, he would get crises of coughing. And then the musicians would stop playing and they would stop coughing. And this was actually uncomfortable because you are supposed to be silent in a concert. And he thought, well, am I getting this, right? What happened next is that then they meant to increase and he had to leave the concert with a lot of expectoration. And he went home thinking about this. This was happening because he was sitting in front of the speakers. And the speakers were actually vibrating the lungs, therefore getting the mucus out of the lungs. And by doing this, you know, by realizing this, he then realized that they could have a solution for this, which was he went home and started experimenting with speakers that he would put in front of his own lungs. You know, he later developed what's called the frequencer. And when we looked at cystic fibrosis, we found a lot of solutions. Saltwater treatment, one solution that was medically validated, and a paper was published in the New England Journal of Medicine. It was developed by a surfer in Australia. You know, solutions like using trampolines for kids. Parents of some patients realized that this was good because while jumping in trampolines, what you are doing is to actually vibrate the lungs, and therefore, you know, with this vibration, you will loosen the mucus from the lungs, and then you can get it out through expectoration. Lots of examples that we could really talk about for a long time. And that's when people start believing us. Because until then, people were saying, oh, those are just random examples. Then we decided to focus for a little bit in rare diseases, because rare diseases are individually rare, but guess what? Almost 10% of the population suffers from a rare disease, which is a lot of people. And if you think about these numbers, you will see that there is a strong incentive for people from rare diseases to actually do something about it. Because over here, what happens is that people have to do something because pharmaceuticals and science doesn't have the incentive to do much about it. There's some diseases with 20 people in Portugal, right? So there's not really an incentive for people to do this, for people to develop drugs for these diseases. I will jump these slides because you see, the problem that we were finding was that there was no mechanism for people to actually share the knowledge, share the solution that they could use for themselves with others. And this was particularly critical for diseases like those rare diseases. And at some point, what happened was that we decided to do a research platform. This was going to be a platform for us to use in our own research. And then I started talking about, you know, this topic in conferences like this one. And it was very interesting because at some point we were approached by people that we didn't know, people like the Peter Pribilla Foundation in Germany saying, you know, what you are doing is quite interesting. We would like to give you some money. Well, you know, I don't typically get approached. By the way, you are happy. You know, I'm happy to take money from you as well. But people at the end of the session typically don't approach us to give us money, right? When you are in academia. Another guy that approached us was a guy that has been a great supporter, a guy that we didn't know, and basically said, you know, I would like to help this project. You don't know me, by the way, but my name is Richard Roberts, and I got the Nobel Prize for Medicine. It's like, wow, okay, that's nice. You could really help us. And the thing he did afterwards was remarkable because he said, you know, one thing that we could do was to invite some of my Nobel laureates because we could really create a committee of people that could support your project. And I think they could have an impact. And they are having a huge impact. And then we were impressed when the United Nations Development Programme made an article about our project. They put it on their website saying, we are very excited about this project. People were actually pushing us to do more than a research platform, but then more than that, to actually do a platform that could help patients out there. And we did it. We did this platform that was launched 2 months ago in Lisbon. And since then, we have received all sorts of endorsements from the 5 continents. You know, patient associations in Australia, in Malaysia, in Serbia, in Brazil, in the US, in Portugal, in the UK. Not yet from Norway, by the way, but we'll fix that. Were interested in supporting our project. You know, people like Richard Roberts, a Nobel laureate, or Eric Van Ippel, a very prestigious professor from MIT, actually the father of youth in innovation, are among the supporters and the members of the advisory board. That includes several Nobel laureates, like Aaron Shishanover from Israel, another Nobel laureate, or a guy that is not yet a Nobel laureate, Bob Langer, but it will be almost for sure. He owns 1,030 patents. 1,030 patents is probably more than most of us in this room, or even altogether, right? So these people are remarkable, or other people that are not on that group in the advisory board, but like the director of the Media Lab at MIT, and lots of other remarkable people were approaching us to support our team. And this is our team in Lisbon, and the team that actually involves people across different disciplines. For instance, it was very critical for us to start talking with medical doctors. And we actually have now a chief medical officer who's sitting in the audience. And, you know, all these people are contributing to the project in a way that we couldn't really anticipate. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about this experience because this is the process of coming from a pure research initiative into, in this case, a non-profit platform for patients of chronic diseases to share their solutions. And this is happening now. This is just in the beginning. But I think we can actually do something quite remarkable out of this, maybe with your help as well. So if people around here are interested in helping us, we have students in the audience, we have researchers in the audience, we need your help. We are actually having a meeting after this with someone here at NTH that is not NTH anymore. This was NTH when I was a student here, but now it's NTNU, right? And all your help is welcome. We are going to launch soon what we call the Patient Innovation Award, which is an initiative to recognize patients that have developed solutions to save themselves in the very beginning, but also to save the lives of many others. So thank you so much for your attention, and we need your help.